People who make their livings in the Gulf waters or along the Gulf Coast may have a different idea, especially after the government greatly expanded a no-fishing area in the Gulf today because of the threat from the oil. Our correspondent Phil Keating is live in Venice, Louisiana. Phil, you just wrapped up a helicopter tour with the Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. It's clear now that you can't see all the oil because they've admitted some of it is in large pools beneath the surface, but how did it look?
Well, we saw a major development for southeastern Louisiana for the first time since this all began nearly a month ago. We saw the first evidence of heavy oil in and around the very fragile wetlands and precious marshlands that make up southeastern Louisiana. Keep in mind, this area accounts for 30% of the United States' diet of seafood, as well as 30% of its energy. And we saw long streaks of black oil, and in some of the eddies and little coves, we saw very orangish rust-colored pockets of oil, and the governor says based on what he's seeing, the situation is clearly only getting worse.
We've had some tar balls, we've had some sheet. This is the first time we've had reports of heavy oil coming that close to actually making contact with our wetlands, our marshlands.
And it didn't take us long to get there. We're in Venice, which is basically the last town as you head south towards the Mississippi Delta, and we flew in that helicopter maybe 10, 15 minutes before we saw that oil.
Well, did the governor comment on the BP executive's claims that it's his belief from everything he knows that the impact of this will be very modest? Did Governor Jindal weigh in on that?
He did not weigh in on that. I did press him to see what he thought BP was being as open as possible. You know, a couple of U.S. senators demanding more video being released, and we just showed that at the top of the show. He says he wants most open and public access as possible, but he would not criticize BP. But I will tell you this, he did not criticize the Corps of Engineers either, and that's the one pressing issue he's got. They are waiting in the state of Louisiana to get authorization from the Corps of Engineers to start dredging and building 6-foot-high barrier islands all around the existing barrier islands. They think that will be the best-case barrier to absorb the oil, which they see as definitely coming in now.
Wow, these pictures are frightening looking, Phil. I wonder if the governor commented on BP's position on one other matter. Independent scientists and oceanographers and the rest have volunteered to go down and measure the flow of this using robotic submarines and beyond. They have the technology to do it. So we would know exactly how much oil really is going into the Gulf. But BP, in a news conference last week, openly, flatly denied access to that area. And I wonder if Governor Jindal spoke on that.
That was actually one of my top 3 questions that I asked him on board the Black Hawk helicopter. Does he think BP ought to be allowing independent analysts and researchers to drop equipment down there? And he did not answer the question in a direct way, basically avoiding it. Keep in mind down here, the state and the economy in Plaquemines Parish, very dependent on oil and also the fishing industry. One's being impacted by the other right now, but they're trying to really keep a positive balance to try to at least move forward till they can possibly resolve this sooner than later.
Were you at all surprised that the governor wasn't interested in knowing how much oil is actually going into the water there? Was he concerned that maybe the people might be alarmed by what they find?
Well, he says he wants the public, and he wants the public to be able to know.
But if he wants the public to be able to know, did he say why he didn't push BP? Because, I mean, it's BP saying, no, you can't come check, but obviously BP doesn't own the water.
Right. It was my impression that the governor's being delicate here as he continues this environmental disaster. He's got to work with BP to try to get them to pay for all of these ideas he says that are currently needed to get into place to protect his state.
Yeah, lot of cogs in this wheel. Phil Keating, understood.